So AOC appeared on the Chris Cuomo show on CNN, and she actually did a pretty darn good job here. There's actually only one portion where I wish she would have pushed back on, but you guys will see what that is. This is a very lengthy clip. It's almost 8 minutes, but you're going to want to watch it. Once you start watching the clip, you'll be pulled in. It's very interesting. AOC going on mainstream media. I'm actually surprised that AOC doesn't make more mainstream media appearances. They would definitely love to have her on. AOC is great for ratings anywhere she goes. So, it'd be cool if she goes on more. Same thing with the other Justice Dems, honestly. Rashida, Ilhan, all of them. Hopefully they start making more appearances. But go ahead and check this out. We're going to come back and talk about it.
Let's talk politics, and then we'll talk policies. Politics first. Didn't happen last night on two levels. One, you saw Biden overperform from what was expected. I mean, let's be honest. At this time last week, there was a lot of talk about whether he'd make it through Super Tuesday. Overperformed with people in the suburbs that you people need. Overperformed with what we call white working class people. We both hate the demographics, but they are what they are. Those are the labels. Why did he overperform? How do you win back, especially in a place like Michigan, where Bernie Sanders must beat Biden?
Well, I think one of the things that we saw, and first of all, of course, we want to be good sportsmen in this process and to congratulate the former vice president on his performance. But he overperformed because he had low expectations. And I think that's one thing that we have to clarify. It was kind of a last-minute consolidation of some of the more moderate and conservative Democratic candidates in the cycle, which happened right before this race. And for folks who are making that decision in the 72 hours before the race, where you have these dramatic developments, that is compelling, but that is an event and it is a moment. It is not necessarily a movement, which is what the senator has been building, not just over the past year, but over the past several years.
True again.
Also, something to notice last night, his performance among Latinos will help put critical states in play in November. Nevada, Arizona, Colorado. These are states that we need to be competitive, and Senator Bernie Sanders is delivering key constituencies that we need to win in November.
I agree with the criticism that there were low expectations. That is actually a matter of fact. Now, it has to be a concern for the Sanders campaign that so many people who broke late broke against him. That's not new. What is new, 2016 versus 2020, is the idea of the movement. And I say it all the time, Congresswoman, that Bernie is the only one who's got a movement behind him. Now the Biden people have beaten me up for it. Whatever, that's the business. They didn't show up for you last night. The young people who you are promising to the party that you can bring in didn't come in anywhere. How do you explain that with any optimism?
Well, I think one thing that we have to see, and one huge question, is the largest prize of the night, which is California. And we are going to be having hundreds of delegates decided, which was the largest prize yesterday, which Bernie Sanders won, not won by a little, won by a lot. We are going to see exactly what that lead looks like.
Yeah, we have to see. It'll take days. It's hard to know. He's certainly ahead, but you guys wanted like 60% of the delegates. You're looking at like 40, 45 right now, but let's play that out. Let's not play with the ifs.
Well, we can't get too greedy sometimes.
Well, but look, it's a greedy business. You know what I mean? You need everything you can get because you are at a disadvantage going into the convention, and let's talk about why. Let's be honest about it here. The use of the word establishment, okay? I think the case can be made that you lost to Democrats last night. Not the establishment. There are too many different demographics that came to play on Biden's side. You can't dismiss them all as part of the problem. So you are injecting a progressivism into a party that is mostly center-left. First, let's talk about the language. Do you have to be careful about establishment because you make people feel like African Americans, like all of a sudden they're part of the problem?
Well, I do think that there's a kind of a disingenuous conflating of what we mean. The fact of the matter remains that Bernie Sanders is now the only frontrunner in this race that does not take corporate lobbyist money. He does not take money from health insurance executives. He does not take money from fossil fuel lobbyists, and he does not have closed door. Fundraisers with elites, and I think that is an important distinction. Now, if you voted. If you did not vote for Senator Sanders last night, that doesn't mean you're part of the establishment. And I think every American knows that there's a very strong grip of special interests in Washington. Bernie Sanders has a unique integrity. He is not bought, and he has zero corporate lobbyist money financing his campaign.
You think Biden is bought?
I think that there are real issues with where campaign money comes from, and I think it's not a secret. This is how many of if even swing district members won their races in 2018 because they do not take corporate PAC money. There are some that are very progressive. There are some that are very conservative. But one of the through lines that we saw in 2018 was that if you won your race, you likely did not take corporate PAC money. It is a huge trust issue with voters, and I think that Bernie Sanders has that trust. What he says, he will do everything he can to deliver.
I get you conceptually. I think it gets a little tricky for voters because they get caught up in the numbers. Sanders has such a massive money machine. You're right. Where it's coming from is different. That's a fair point of distinction. But the money story right now is that Biden had like $18.50 in campaign terms. Right? He had like 2.2 million, spent $2 million in the last week. Bernie Sanders 10x'd him, but didn't get it done. Last point that I want for you, and you know you're always invited here to continue the case for the senator. Us versus them. I do not accept, at this point, the comparisons between Donald Trump and your candidate. I don't think it's fair because one of them is pushing a malignancy in this country that division works. And Bernie Sanders, even at his worst, doesn't approach that. But you guys do play the us versus them game. And it makes me wonder what you think the future is at the convention. Because either you split off and do like in Europe, where you guys are the Labor Party or the Green Party, you have like a real other party, or the us versus them thing, how does it not come back to bite you when you come to convention time when it seems like everybody else is part of your problem?
Well, one thing that I would say, and that I hope, just for the sake of the party overall, is that this does not get to a brokered convention. I think that is really important. I think that hurts the nominee, whoever that nominee is. I think it's really important that the American people and that the Democratic electorate, that the
Bernie
voters
agree with that, or is that AOC on her own?
Decide. Well, I think overall, I think that the senator has reiterated his point that he believes that the person with the most delegates.
He switched the position, AOC. We both know that. 2016, he was saying something different. Look, I get politics. I don't mean, I'm not beating up the senator unfairly,
tell you, Chris,
but he changed it.
Well, I can tell you, Chris, that my opinion and how I feel is that we have to unite as a party, and the way that we do that is by deciding our nominee at the polls. It's extraordinarily important. Some things are bigger than a primary, and defeating Donald Trump is extraordinarily important. That's why I think supporting Bernie Sanders is very important. He performs better than Biden does at the polls against Trump. He performs better in the industrial Midwest. And guess what? As we learned in 2016, you can get all the votes you want against Trump. If you don't get the Electoral College, we will not get the presidency back. We can get millions more votes than Donald Trump. We need to win Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, which are all the states that Bernie Sanders wins against Trump and outperforms Biden in many of these states.
Well,
this is due to trade. This is due to immigration. This is due to a lot of different issues in which the senator has exemplified a commitment to working class people.
I hear you, and the most important poll is going to come out next Tuesday.
Absolutely.
And we will see what happens in Michigan, and that will really do a lot to shape the race. Every time there's an opportunity to discuss these issues going forward, you know you have a place here if you want it. Same goes for the senator.
And I deeply appreciate that.
Absolutely. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the best to you, and good luck to the candidate going forward.
Thank you so very much.
So as you saw there, she went on pretty strong. She went on with her points that she made. She hit on all of her points. So many of them were points that Chris Cuomo even agreed with. So it's pretty big when you get CNN hosts to agree with you. Now, the biggest thing that I want to focus on there is this new talking point that has been concocted. It's hilarious. I almost think that there's a group of people near Tandon and some little shadow group that exists that meet together to try to concoct these talking points, because they all sound the same. They say the same stuff. And so now you've created this new talking point, which is, you're calling all these millions of voters the establishment. No, we're not calling them the establishment. Of course they're not the establishment, dude. The establishment is what the establishment is. The establishment is a very small group of people who are elected politicians who currently hold office, and then their donor class. Those are the people who are the establishment. So Nancy Pelosi, for example, she is part of the establishment. Literally, the establishment of the Democratic Party right now, Nancy Pelosi, all right? She is the establishment, okay? The people who voted for Nancy Pelosi are not part of the establishment. That's like saying a poor person who's licking boots for a billionaire is now part of the billionaire class. No, just because the poor person voted for tax cuts doesn't make them a billionaire all of a sudden. No, they're still a poor person who's basically voting against their own interest. That's not how that works. And so Yeah, that's always a very common thing that people try to do, try to make it emotional, try to make people feel like victims, so make the voters feel like victims, and then, antagonize Bernie Sanders. Oh, you're villainizing and antagonizing these voters. It's a clear trick that they're trying to do, and I'm sure it was concocted by Neera Tanden very obviously, because she seems to be behind all their talking points, but it's honestly really embarrassing that this is how far they've sunk to. That's how deep they have to go seriously. I mean, just think about how embarrassing that is. Oh my goodness. But the one thing that I wish AOC had pushed back on there was the whole the convention thing where Chris Cuomo says, oh, that wasn't Bernie's position in 2016. He flipped. No, and I still haven't seen a full throttle debunking of this on mainstream media. I've seen Alexandria Rojas half debunk it, which is, that's the talking point of, oh, Bernie Sanders wrote the rules, now he doesn't want to follow them anymore. No, doofus, it's disingenuous to say that, because Bernie Sanders did not get what he wanted. He had to compromise. And again, as I always say, thank God he did compromise, because otherwise, what would we have? We would have the superdelegates on the first ballot, which would make this election virtually unwinnable, right? So it's a it would be a very, very terrible situation. But what you've got going on here is, basically, so first you have the superdelegates coming in, right? And Bernie Sanders wanting the superdelegates in states that he won to flip for him. But what you've got to understand is they'll say, oh, if you took out the superdelegates, he would have won. She won even with pledge delegates. The problem with that is the pledge delegate outcome was affected by the superdelegates in the beginning. So the fact that the superdelegate count was included in the counter on all the mainstream media outlets, and everyone was running with that number, it affected the final pledge delegate numbers. And in addition to the superdelegates being on the first ballot and affecting the outcome, the election was openly rigged. No one talks about that, because obviously it's a touchy subject, bro. Don't talk about that. It hurts their feelings. It hurts their fifis. The election was rigged. You literally had the headquarters of the party that you're running in for a primary, which promises to say, we're not going to put our thumb on the scale of any race to favor it for a certain candidate. It was literally helmed by Hillary Clinton. The DNC was run by Hillary Clinton as the party is supposed to be a neutral arbiter. So in addition with all the vote rigging that they did, which was like, oh, let's make sure in Bernie Sanders counties, pro-counties, there aren't enough polling stations for Bernie Sanders areas so that they don't vote. Also, let's make sure there's only 6 debates instead of 20 like last time, or 26 debates like last time. Let's make sure that. Let's also leak debate questions the night before to Hillary Clinton. So it was all rigged from the beginning. And then in addition to the rigging, you had superdelegates on the first ballot, which affected the pledged outcome. And then also, if in states where Bernie Sanders dominated and he's not getting those superdelegates, he deserves to get those superdelegates, and he has the right to ask for that. And also, throughout an entire rigged election, he has the right to say, I am going to give my pitch to the superdelegates, because you run an entirely rigged race that you're going to lose. You're going to lose your own rigged race, and then you go, oh, you're going to try and give your pitch to the superdelegates? Yeah, you morons. Of course he's going to do that. The whole thing was rigged against him, and he's doing his last-minute pitch. Obviously, it's what he's going to do. So it's really disingenuous to act like that's, oh, he flipped his position. It's just so dumb, but I have yet to see somebody who has full throttle debunked it. And it's very frustrating, but the pledged delegates were affected by the DNC rigging and the superdelegates voting on the first ballot. So even if you took out the superdelegates, yes, Hillary had more pledged delegates. The only reason she had more pledged delegates was because the superdelegates were on the first ballots and because the election was rigged. And then Bernie Sanders is saying, hey, in states where I won superdelegates, they should go to me. That's what he said. But anyways, AOC doing a good job for the most part. Just that one little piece that I wish she had fixed. But so for the most part, pretty good stuff.